Good evening. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome you all for today's event. Just a short introduction about CIC for many of you who don't know about us. We are a non-governmental organization and we are in the business of conducting intellectual events. And I'm happy to share with you that we have crossed 200 now. And we hope to increase this volume as more and more of you come and encourage us. So it's very, very heartening to see so many of you turning up. I know it's a busy, traffic is terrible, traveling in the city is difficult, but all of you have made it, so a very, very warm welcome. I request our chairman, Mr. Gopal Srinivasan, to say a few words before I introduce the speakers of today.
So I think this is going to be a very, very interesting discussion today. We have with us Kushal Mehra, who I have not met but spoken to. I don't know how many of you have seen his Charvaka podcast. I listened to it. Oh, wow. Kushal, no introduction needed. His book Nastik is of course available, and I think it's available for him. I'm sure he'll sign a few copies for us as outside. So please do pick up a copy of his book also there. Along with him is my friend Harsh Gupta, Harsh Madhusudan. Harsh is a wonderful young economist, very, very strong academics in Dartmouth and INSEAD, and has written a fantastic book, which I believe, The New Idea of India, which I think it was Modi ji, is the only book that he's actually endorsed himself as a must-buy. And now I think he's going to write his next book. I had a chance to collaborate with him recently on some government work, and I can say clearly that this generation of Indians is significantly more competent than at least I was, and maybe my generation was, in terms of clarity and thought. So welcome, Harsh. Thank you. Abhijith Iyer, of course, is Chennai's own boy, I think. So many of you know him. Phenomenally witty and eloquent speaker. He calls himself as a defense economist, but I think he is much more than a defense economist. He is basically very, very multi-talented. He has views on everything. So thank you very much. He's with the National Observer Research Foundation, the National Security Program, and he's also worked at Sandia National Labs and Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. So it promises to be a wonderful talk. I think the title which has been put out for the talk doesn't do justice, because actually it's a very expansive conversation on how a new generation of Indians can think about their philosophy, their origins, and their Sanskriti in a very contemporary way, a much, much needed way of thinking about our timeless civilization. So I'll hand it over to them, and the questions and answers should be flowing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Gopal. I was just glancing through this, and this particular thing resonates with many of us parents who are here. I'd just like to read out. My father is a Murti Puja, and my mother comes from a staunch Arya Samaji family. I wish I could say how, like many atheists from the Western world, I was taught about the importance of faith and the power of prayer. However, as I grew older, I grappled with doubts and uncertainties. How, I wondered, did a benevolent and all-powerful deity allow for so much suffering and injustice in the world? How could I reconcile the teachings of my faith with the ever-expanding body of scientific knowledge that seemed to contradict so much of what I had been taught? But the fact is that nothing like that happened to me. My exposure to Hinduism was Diwali Puja, especially Navaratri Puja, where we become strictly vegetarian for 9 days every year and a Ramayana recitation. That would happen at my uncle's house. We would go to temples to pray on and off, but I would not pray daily in our temple inside our house. Does it resonate? Well, it does, at least for me. We have no answers to these questions when our children ask us. And when we asked our parents, we were told, Aprida. Just follow it, Aprida. So now at least I hope we get some answers. So next time my son asks me, I'll have something to tell him. So I won't stand between you and the very interesting panel that we have in front of us. And I'm sure the question and answer sessions are going to be even more enlightening. So over to you.
Thank you. So I have been given the task of moderating these two. So I think that was Gopal sir trying to say, he's got opinions on everything. So jasti volrade, iva rendu perum volrakoinda tharave. So that's it. Anyway, so just to give you a general introduction, that gentleman there is a Shakta, right, in the Eastern tradition. So Shaivite. So generally that would be, here you have Saiva Sapadu means pure vegetarian. But in the North Indian Shakta tradition, it is, Artabali and things like that. At one point of time, there was also Narbali. Kushal comes from an Arya Samaj family, and he has no belief in God, period. I come from a Tamil and Bong family, and I believe in the Vedas. I believe in the supremacy of the Vedas. I believe in religion. I believe in going to temples, but I don't believe in God. So the question is, how do you reconcile all of that? And that is what, we see so much diversity in India in belief systems and things like that. And you think that somehow this is all just organized chaos. There is no set of beliefs or principles, no first principles that underlines that chaos. Well, wrong. We do actually have those first principles, and that's what this book is about. So I'm going to start with you, Kushal. Why don't you just break down all these schools? What is astika? Because here, when people like Lalu Prasad Yadav or Akhilesh Yadav say, "Hum nastik hain," "Hum nastik nahi hain, hum astik hain," you automatically translate it into the Western concept of being an atheist who goes around, basically, I say in the Tamil context, it could be a Periyarist, that you go around breaking statues and things like that. But that's not what it is, right? So what is an astik, nastik, nirishwarvad, and give us all the permutations and combinations, please.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the Chennai International Centre. Sir, thank you very much for inviting all of us and arranging this wonderful event. I want to start with a caveat today. Everything I say, I want to start by saying I'm not a cultural Hindu. I am a Hindu. I just want to clear that baseline out. And it is from this understanding of how we are and what we are and who we are that all these confusions start. Nowadays, there are these cliches or lines that are used. I am spiritual but not religious. I have never understood what that means. It is like, you go to Starbucks and say, I want chai tea. It's like that. I'm spiritual but not religious. It is that version of that. So I am not religious. I am not spiritual. I'm materialistic. I'm a hardcore materialist. I am a Hindu. I am not a cultural Hindu. And now I'll explain to you how and why I am, because these three terms are bandied around, and I'm glad we are starting, because definitions matter. If we don't define things, we don't understand things. And if we don't understand things, we muddle them. So astik and nastik in the classical Indian pantheon is a distinction based not on a belief in a deity, Ishwar, but the belief is that are the Vedas the supreme pramana of understanding the reality of the universe. Whether we decipher the nature of reality, what is the source code that we are going to use? So originally we had 6 astika schools and 3 nastika schools. The differentiation between an astika and an nastika is purely whether you think the Vedas are the only authority to derive reality. It doesn't mean that the nastikas disregard or disrespect the Vedas. They just don't believe they are the only authority. So that's the first baseline classification. The second word, the sect that he said was Nirishwarvad. Well, there are Ishwarvadis and then there are Nirishwarvadis. Now look at us. Here's an Ishwarvadi, Astik. Here's a Nirishwarvadi, Nastik. Here's a Nirishwarvadi, Astik. He's an Astik. I'm not one. He's one. So in the schools that we have in our thought process, we had Sankhya, we had Mimamsa, the early Mimamsa. There was Uttara Mimamsa and there was Purva Mimamsa. So the early Mimamsakas, they did not believe that we need a deity to do the ritualistic aspect that the Vedas. Basically, the Mimamsaka school was all about the ritualism aspect, like the Karmakanda and a lot of those things. So they, in their point of view, because the baseline of all Hinduism is the 6 Shada Pramana, right? The 6 Pramana system. Now, different schools, again, believe in different sets of Pramanas. The school that I associate with, the Charvakas, I say 1.5, which is kind of, there is a debate on that too. So, Ishwar was a secondary thing, because in our faith systems, our philosophies, we're not God obsessed. It's a very different way of looking at the world than what, in Hindi we have the line, Bhagwan se dar, loosely translated in English as, you should be fearful of God. My parents never told me to be fearful of God. I'm sure, how many of you have actually, did your parents say, be fearful of God? Okay, in your case you were told, in your case you were, okay, 3 of you. Like in my case,
Sorry, 4 of you, but how many of you had your ammas at home saying, Pannu illana, ambal vandu kannu kutti putturva? So that's it, that's what we're talking about.
So, we're neither God-obsessed people, we're not God-fearing people. We love our deity. Like Meera's love for Sri Krishna is beautiful. She had a different kind of love. So these 3 terms, so when you try to understand your system, the first thing, why I wrote this book was actually an ode to my culture. I was celebrating my culture in my way. I wanted to show to the world, because I went through the whole grind, becoming a militant atheist, joining Richard Dawkins' forum. I have the unique record of being thrown out of that forum for being too docile to religion. They expected me to be some violent person. I don't know what I'm supposed to go on atheist for.
So just to be clear, their idea, technically the Western idea of an atheist would be an Indian Periyarist. You're required to go break statues.
Worse than that, I think.
Okay.
Worse than that. I think even Periyarists would be like a pale shadow of the level of intellectual aggression that neo-atheism has. I think neo-atheism is the most epistemically violent ideology that I've come across in, like I quote Richard Dawkins in the book where, he talks about the God of the Bible, and which is the most famous quote of Richard Dawkins ever. The God of the Bible is X, Y, Z. When I read that, I was like, what's wrong with this person? Like, okay, I get you have problematic verses, but so much anger. But then I understand, because through all of this, and then I'll hand it over back to Abhijith and Harsh, is always remember, there is one more fundamental difference, which is why they don't understand, they being the monopolistic, monotheistic mindset, is that blasphemy, conceptually, and apostasy, conceptually. Blasphemy is the concept where you can't insult a god or religion. I don't need to tell you, this culture literally has that festival, right, where you actually say nasty things to Ayyappa, and then in the evening you say, oh, sorry, yaar, let's do setting. This culture has that, right? So, or apostasy would be, you can leave the faith, and you will not be hurt for it. So when you don't have these 2 things in your system, you can't be out of the system. The system just says, okay, you have your new club. It's like, okay, we have some disagreements. I'm going to start my own firm across the road, and we are going to respect each other, and we'll compete in the marketplace of ideas. It's not how monopolistic monotheism was built, which is why atheists, a lot of atheists, when I came across from the West, especially from monotheistic backgrounds, they had a lot of hostility to religion, is because the source code was hostile to them. So I don't really blame them in a way. But in my case, I never faced that hostility. So now that we have that baseline understanding of where the difference itself starts, now we can have a discussion around the philosophy.
But before we get to the philosophy, I just wanted to sort of break this down a bit more. because the source code in the West essentially punishes you with some form of death or mutilation or something like that.
Spit means death in
Therefore, you find that Western atheism is just as militant and proselytizing, as in they have an inferiority complex where you need to believe that the atheist is speaking the truth, as much as the theist needs you to believe that Christ is your one true savior. And within that, either the Protestant Christ or the Catholic Christ or what have you. In Hinduism, obviously you don't. You can leave one faith and go to another faith, another belief system. And this comes back to, was it Rousseau or Voltaire who said, religion is essential, but God is an optional extra. We ended up saying that before Voltaire or Rousseau did. But coming to you, Harsh, what I want to know is, because of this sort of intolerant source code, we've had a lot of social tension in European history, right? Where you've had wars of religion, you've had horrible wars of religion. You had the first crusade wasn't against Muslims. It was actually the Albigensian crusade against fellow Christians who were in the south of France, who were then gone and killed in their millions. The second was then against the Muslims. In India, you may not have had religious violence, but you've had, it's not exactly been a peaceful society. You know, this notion that pre-Muslim India was this lovely utopia where everybody used to gift each other roses, and we used to have these lovely academic debates, and you know, it was all Sanskrit verse quotation. It was like Antakshari. Instead of Antakshari, it was Vedic Antakshari, you know. Om Purnamudha Purnamada Purna Purnamudashyate, and then he'll come back with Hiranyagarbhasya Patrena ta 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 ta, and etc. etc. It wasn't like that. It was pretty damn violent. So what are the sources then of social violence in religion when you don't have an intolerant source code?
So first of all, again, thank you, Gopalji, and everybody here for coming out. So happy that Kushal, my very good friend's book, is getting such a great review, and glad to be on the panel with you, Abhijith. I think in India, or in dharma, Hindu dharma, in Sanatan dharma, in our social context, interchangeable but not exactly the same terms, the intolerance was not theological, it was sociological. So
Explain that, break that down.
Exactly. So the hierarchy, it was, yes, there was not apostasy or blasphemy. And that is what allows us, despite different views, like, okay, let me just ask, how many in the audience, just raise your hand, who think of themselves as Nastik? Okay. So that's like two or three people.
No. That's not a correct, this one. How many of you believe the Vedas are the supreme source?
Yeah.
Okay. Believe the Vedas are the supreme source of interpretation of all Hinduism.
So most don't, and many therefore are Nastik. But you can see,
Yeah.
for example,
50% of you are Nastik.
no, not 50%, I think a lower number. But my point is, so many have come here to listen to somebody like Kushal. That shows the idea.
You want to have fun? How many of you believe in a Ishwar?
Okay, that's a majority.
That's a majority. See,
But there's so many who don't. There's a good, solid minority here that don't believe in an
And
Ishwar.
let me just add by saying, and I was discussing earlier with Gopalji also, I think a lot of us, if you're more honest, also go through phases. The same person goes through a Nastik phase. Same person goes through a Nideshwar. So it's even the person whose eye is not necessarily blocked in a particular channel. Although in public we are forced to adopt one or the other view. So that being aside, it was never a question of, see, which is why Hinduism was not about theology. It is not about orthodoxy in that sense, it was orthopraxy. It was not about theological hierarchies or intolerance. It was about, to some extent, and we must discuss this openly, sociological intolerance. For example, and why is that relevant to a debate on religion or spirituality? So sociological, of course, the issues of hierarchies in caste, the rights of women, basically, and of course, it's not like unique to India. This has been across the world. Different countries, different civilizations, in due course of time, with urbanization, industrialization, democracy, have tried to overcome and to some extent have succeeded. And India is also on that path. So it's not something very unique to India. But what was unique in India was the theological intolerance was definitely missing. Now, on the sociological part is also relevant to the Nastik debate because only 100 years ago we had the Vaikom Satyagraha in Kerala. And then, of course, it spread all over the country. The Vaikom Satyagraha initially was not even about allowing the so-called lower castes to enter temples. It was initially about allowing the so-called lower caste to enter temple roads. Not about temples, temple roads. Temple roads in which non-Hindus could enter. So only lower caste, so quote unquote, Hindus could not enter, while upper caste Hindus could and non-Hindus could. And this is only 100 years ago. So whenever people say that caste, or even caste has to be defined as jati mapping to varna. Because people always say, don't use a foreign term, so let's use an Indian term. Jati deciding your varna. That is actually the right understanding of caste. So jati is where you're born. Like jati is literally, everybody has a jati. If you're Polish American, it's a jati. Varna is you're an American soldier. Jati Varna is like saying all Polish Americans should be American soldiers. And nobody else should be American soldiers. So Jati Varna is the caste system where Jati decides, maps based on a hereditary hierarchical sense, your caste identity, your Varna identity. So if you read the Rig Veda, if you read the Vedic Samhitas, there is absolutely no mention of hereditary hierarchical Varna at all. At all. And at least I've read all the translations, I've not read it in the original Vedic Sanskrit. But starting with the Dharma Sutras, the so-called Dharma Sutras, which later became Dharma Shastras, Manu Smriti, etc., there are very clear references to this. The reason this is important is they were forced down the people saying, if you believe in God, if you believe in our dharma, you cannot go against this. You know, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said a very famous thing after the Kalaram Satyagraha failed in 1935. This was a satyagraha for temple entry in Nashik. So 1920s, Vaikom Satyagraha had partial success. Full success happened by 1940s. 1930s, the Kalaram Satyagraha in Nashik failed. Dalits could not get the right to entry in Hindu temples there. So in 1935, Ambedkar made the famous statement that I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu. It is another point that he chose the panth of the Tathagata, Buddha, which is larger within the broader definition of Sanatan Dharma, which also we should briefly discuss. Sanatan Dharma, obviously a loaded term in Tamil Nadu. Let's discuss that also. But the reason he said one very famous line in that statement when he said, I will not die a Hindu. He said, religion is for man, man is not for religion. He said, religion is for man, man is not for religion. And I believe you need to go, I'm an economist, so I always think economic analogies. There is a U-curve effect. All societies, as they modernize, they go through a certain sense of disbelief, atheism, nastika, different terms, agnosticism, skepticism, while they again come back to some harmonious mean. Because without that doubting, quote-unquote, Thomases from a different context, you cannot have reform. See, all reform is opposed by saying it is against our core belief system. So somebody has to stand outside, quote-unquote, that core belief system to reform that belief system. Then the belief system becomes whole and harmonious again. So the point on Sanatan Dharma, it's very important to understand. In Sanatan Dharma, which is why I absolutely agree with the opening statement Kushal made, he is not a cultural Hindu, he is a Hindu. There is no adjective required, there is no modifier required for a Nastika Hindu. He is just a Hindu. He is not a lesser Hindu than I am. In no way is Abhijith a lesser Hindu than I am because I am both an Ishwarvadi and a Nastika. This guy is neither, he is only Ishwarvadi but a Nastika. Sorry, the other way around, he is a Astika but a Nirishwarvadi. In Hinduism, or rather Sanatan Dharma, of which Hinduism is only a subset, the only thing required is mutual respect. What works for me, that also at this particular time, it need not necessarily work for you. I actually grew up remembering as a child, remembering that I was used to go to, one very clear memory I have is I went to Kamakhya Mandir with my mom and dad, and I refused to get out of the car because this is my teenage atheist phase. And the most beautiful thing, which again Kushal mentioned about his parents, not once did anybody in my broader family ever scare me. And I also did college in the US, so I now know very different experiences of people growing up in the Christian and Muslim environments. They never scared me. They always said, "Abhi ye nastik hai, 2-4 saal mein theek ho jayega. Things will change in 2-4 years." It was almost like they were laughing at this guy. Okay, he's just going through a phase. Oh, he's now a Shah Rukh Khan fan. Never mind, he'll grow up. You know, I mean, no offense meant to. I mean, I used to be an SRK fan. Never mind. So the point is, it was just a phase. It was never seen as something to be either mocked and definitely not humiliated to. And therefore, what happened is, as I grew up, I lost family members. Somebody became old. One very dear person committed suicide. For whatever reasons, I, from my inside, started this desire of wanting to understand something beyond pure materialism. I slowly became a Shiva Bhakt. I now go to Trimbakeshwar as often as I can. That's my favorite mandir for other reasons I'll not discuss right now. But it was such a smooth, organic process where nobody ever forced me in any way whatsoever. And because of that reason, I am able to be in a situation that I can ask for social reform to make Hinduism more universal without in any way feeling like I'm compromising my belief in the deities, for example, like a Shiva Bhakt. Just I'll conclude simply by saying here, Abhijith, for example, it's very important to understand, it's easy to discuss about the past victory reforms, because then we can all pat ourselves about how reformed we are. We have to discuss about debates that are relevant today. For example, in Sabarimala, there is a requirement that only people from Kerala and of a certain caste can be priests. It does not even say that you have to be from a particular traditional family, etc. It just mentions a caste requirement. Now, my question is, if 100 years ago, we could change our quote-unquote traditions by allowing all Hindus to enter. In fact, it was not even 100 years ago. This change happened around 70 years ago. It started around 100 years ago. What is it which is preventing us from allowing all fellow Hindus who fully qualify, who do all the rituals properly, who do all the discipline properly, the rigors properly from childhood, who are already priests in quote-unquote smaller temples, to qualify for this? Because, this is where this quote-unquote caste orthodoxy and the atheists in Tamil Nadu agree on the definition of Sanatan Dharma. They both agree that caste is intrinsic to Sanatan Dharma. It is actually the true Vedic understanding, and which is why I call myself a Nastik, because I believe the true Vedic understanding is much more universal. I don't think it in any way, believing in Vedas does not in any way negate any deeper understanding, so I'm happy to be an astika in that sense. Why is it that if it is okay to allow people on the basis of caste, the next logical step of allowing anybody, irrespective of caste, as priest or temple cook, etc., gets such strong emotions? We should let this issue completely die behind us, because if this is core and temple entry was not core, then what was not core? Why was it allowed for hundreds of years? And if both are not core, we can reform that. So without some kind of skepticism in the body politic, in the civilization, we can never ever do social reform. And that is how Nastikta, free speech, social reform are intrinsically interrelated in my worldview.
So basically what you said is Puri Shankaracharya and Udayanidhi Stalin are on the same page.
Yes, they agree on the definition.
Okay, yeah.
Just one supports it, one opposes it.
Yeah, of course. One wants to exterminate it, the other wants to perpetuate it. Perfect, okay. So that being the case, there is an argument to be made. I'm playing the devil's advocate now. I'm going to put on my Brahminical oppressor, patriarchal hat now, oppressing everybody else. There is an argument that is made, Kushal, which is that if you allow one tradition to fall, it is opening the gates to the barbarians, because then every tradition will fall. Once you get rid of Varna or Varna-based discrimination, then why don't you accept Jesus as your savior? Okay. How do you come back to that?
First of all beliefs are not equal. this argument is based on the assumption that all beliefs are equal, then that would mean that innocently harming a child is equal to innocently caring for a child. They're not the same. Values have effects. Values have third order effects, fourth order effects. For example, in the classic economics and sociological term, it is called LINDY, the Lindy effect. Basically, anything that has survived the passage of time is a great idea. Well, I'll tell you what has survived the passage of time. Many cultures, even today, including subcultures in our society, believe women should be oppressed. I'm not talking about outside the Hindu fold. I'm talking about within the Hindu fold, right? There are many who might believe individually that women should be oppressed. Well, guess what? That idea has come from 10,000 years where women were oppressed. So should that idea, just by the mere argument that, hey, it has been for 10,000 years, it has survived the passage of time, it should be allowed? No. Values are objectively measurable in most cases. We just don't like to admit to that.
So then the counter question then to you, Kushal, is you're basically juxtaposing two different moralities here. There is a pre-industrial morality and post-industry where all things need to change to sustain industry, capital, the capital needed for industry, the social mobility needed for capitalism to work, etc., etc. In that sense, capitalism is the reformer, right? Economics is the reforming element or the stimulus for reform. And how do you then, because let's be clear about this. How many of you read Barbara Tuchman's A Calamitous 14th Century? Have any of you read that book? No. I would highly recommend you read that, because if you read it, you will realize that in the 1300s, when the plague was hitting, the Black Death was hitting Europe, it killed off almost 33% of the population. Their level of caste, what we call caste discrimination here, was mirrored exactly with class discrimination in Europe. The lower classes would only wear brown clothes. They couldn't even wear colored clothes. Definitely not purple, but not yellow, not white, not blue. Blues and greens strictly no. These were all meant for royalty. You could not drink from certain wells. Just like today in India, only Rajputs in some villages can ride horses. Most castes in large parts of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh are not allowed to ride horses, which is why if you see a BSP rally where somebody is riding a horse, it's actually a social protest. We won't understand it in Tamil Nadu, right? So for example, there's so many differences from Tamil Nadu to the north. In the north, all decent women will wear ghungat over their head. Here it is such a bad, evil omen. They'll ask you, if you cover your head and things like that. And so on and so forth. So there is a huge difference out there. But when the BSP, if you see in their rallies them riding horses and things, this was imported from Europe. Do you know of the Juris Prima Nocte, the Droit du Seigneur? Yes. You know, but audience, do you know? No. It is the right of the landlord to deflower his tenant's bride on the first night. Essentially rape her on the first night. You will actually, if you go back to district records some 20, 30 years back, starting from South Arcot here, the British are the first that wrote about it. It's not been written by anybody else, but the British actually write these in their district records of how this was prevalent. And this was, we suspect, it's an oppression system directly imported from 1400s from the West. Okay, we don't know how it came, but it certainly becomes a part of the thing out here. But it was there in the West. Now, that being the case, understand, when we talk about discrimination, these are pre-industrial societies where discrimination is quite acute. Till about the Gupta Empire, your caste was completely interchangeable. You could move around, Varna could basically move around. Fahin, for example, I think I don't know how many of you have done CBSE history. When he comes, he doesn't talk about caste. But in the 7th century, so this is the 4th century AD, in the 7th century when Huensang comes, he's completely caste obsessed.
Which, by the way, genetic data confirms.
Which genetic data confirms. Endogamy, which is to say, na mama vedan kalyano pannipen, etc., etc., starts something like 1,500 years back. And this conforms to a certain period of history where you see the ancient classical world collapse. You see an end of urbanization. Note that word, very, very important, an end of urbanization. The feudalization of society and the ruralization of society. It's not that all cities disappear. Varanasi, for example, remains a buzzing. Varanasi, Mathura, they remain buzzing metropolises. But overall, the number of cities declines. We become a country of villages, which is what happens with Europe as well, post the Roman Empire. And you have massive social intolerance. So that comes to the question, how is it? Now, Europe, when it urbanized after the Roman Empire, it developed both religious intolerance and social intolerance. Why was India different in that sense that we developed extreme social intolerance but not religious intolerance?
That's actually a great question, because it leads me to my line that I always use. The fundamentalist of a religious sect will be like the fundamentals of the religion. Always remember this. A fundamentalist Marxist will not be the same like a fundamentalist Jain. For example, a Marxist will be sticking to the core principles of Marxism. A Jain would be sticking to the core principles of Jainism.
Explain that in practical terms.
So a Jain will never harm anyone. A Jain would renunciate and go away. A Jain would not make every property public property, government property, and then redistribute it. But a Marxist would. And the Marxist would use violence as a legitimate means, which is not allowed in Jainism. So when we use words like, oh, he's a fundamentalist. I'm like, yeah, what if you're a fundamentalist for free speech? I'm a good fundamentalist. What if you're a fundamentalist for ending misogyny? I think I'm a decent person, right? So the answer to your question is why our problems are different and why we as a faith system, we are the oldest faith system. There is no debate on that anymore. Post-agriculture, post-animism, because animism is the universal baseline, right? What we like jokingly call booga booga people. Basically, everybody was booga booga, and then agriculture happened. And then agriculture happens, we become sedentary.
Okay, do you know what booga booga is? Okay, booga booga is, when I was doing, when my mother was in hospital, that chicken came and it crowed on the windowsill, and therefore, adu daivam, adu na kumda poren, that is chicken devta. So it's shamanism in that sense. You see omens from the natural world. Like the black cat crossed my path, that is now bad luck. Today we take it as something of a joke, but in those days it was taken very, very seriously. And all pre-agrarian religion, which is why the Turks and the Mongols, because they did not have a sedentary lifestyle, remained shamanists, and they were so quickly converted to, say, Islam or Buddhism within 20, 30 years pretty much, because suddenly sedentary life, you see, oh, that means that chicken crowing didn't cure my mother. The lizard falling on my head did not make me a king. Me slipping on the cat's piss did not lead to my cancer getting cured. That is the movement away. You're looking at very rudimentary cause and effect from immediate nature to when agriculture sets in, you're looking for a larger meaning in life.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we're trying to explain. And in my book, I don't look at religion as a faith system. I look at religion from a purely evolutionary lens, from the point of view of what we, in evolutionary psychology and biology, Richard Dawkins came up with this concept, later on expanded by many other evolutionists. It's called memes. Memes are sets of ideas. And over a period of time, just like genes replicate, and the sole purpose of the gene is replication, the sole purpose of the meme is replication. Now, some good memes survive, some bad memes survive. The beauty of our society is that we did not, unlike how he explained beautifully, that the animistic beliefs of many societies were destroyed. Look what we did. We did not abandon our animism. We absorbed and digested our animism, and we made it part of the larger system. Now, so many of you, if you actually start looking at anthropology and archaeology, and you start looking at cave paintings through the Indian history, I'm not even talking about outside this landmass. I'm talking about this very landmass extending, let's say, hypothetically from the borders of Iran, that area, right up to Sri Lanka and other parts of the subcontinent. You will see cave paintings, and you'll be like, damn, I do that today. I'm talking about cave art. That is like 20,000 years, 14,000 years. That's a long time. We have so comfortably absorbed so many things, like B.B. Lal, the great B.B. Lal, one of our foremost archaeologists, in one of his books, he has shown how artifacts found in the Indus Valley civilization, we can comfortably date IVC now comfortably up to 6,000 years with hardcore evidence, unassailable evidence, and we can push it up to 7,500 years. There is the sindoor. That the sindoor is, I think, a universal Indian phenomenon from south to all the way up to Kashmir. Wherever Hindus live, the sindoor is there. It's there in the IVC. And he shows
in Indus Valley civilization.
Yeah, Indus Valley civilization. And interestingly, if you look at the archaeology of the Ganga belt, which is Sinoli and all those, you see so many differences in the Ganga belt and the Indus Valley, but not so many in the Sangam archaeological digs and the Indus Valley. So much for the north-south divide there. So the difference is actually in Punjab, Haryana and UP, Bihar. When you look at it archaeologically and epigraphically, there is a much bigger difference in those folks who are living right beside each other. But if you look at all the way down here and you look at artificial digs over here, you don't see many differences. You actually see continuity. Yeah, there will be differences and that's fine. But at a core level, the faith has not changed, which is why the solution of why we are all the way we are is because I feel, which is why I was compelled to write this book. My book was not for disbelievers. My book was for believers. My book was for believers to be like, this is why you are the way you are. We have to understand, nowadays there's a word which is very famous in Hindu circles, you have to decolonize your mind. No. The Kushanas were colonizers. They became us.
Ashoka was a colonist.
Ashoka was a colonizer. There were many, the Greeks were colonizers. Many people
Cholas were colonizers. Yeah, are you proud of the Cholas? Yes
Yeah.
or no? Do you support his invasion of Malaysia, Indonesia? Ha, ya na. Then why should we decolonize?
So-
You're proud of it, no?
Yeah, so-
Chora pride.
What we are talking about is a very specific cognitive flip, which is not decolonization, it's de-Abrahamization. There's a difference between the two. I'm not using de-Abrahamization as a pejorative. I'm just saying it is a cognitive flip. Where if somebody, when I told Mom, I don't believe in things, all she said was, shut up and eat your breakfast. Not because she had some zeal or anything. She didn't care because she's like, that was a reaction. And that's the reaction. Why do I get hundreds of emails from closeted believers and disbelievers say, I'll get emails from people, Bhaiya, I'm like you. I'm like, what do you mean like me? Yeah, we are both human beings. But no. I am like you in the mimetic sense. This is why my biggest reason is I want to explain Indian philosophy on Indian terms, not on Western terms. And that includes Indian disbelief, not just Indian belief.
So, taking that to you, Harsh, I think the biggest thing out here which we've arrived at is something that is described as substance and salience, right? You all know what substance and salience is, yes? So, substance is what makes Gopal sir, Kushal, me and Harsh Hindus. Salience is, so substance is what connects the four of us, or all of us in this room. Salience is what makes the four of us, or all this room, different from Boris Johnson or Vladimir Putin. Okay? Now, an Abrahamic religion has a very clear set of rules. If you're a Protestant, you believe in a certain catechism. If you do not believe in that, you're some other sect. Now, the biggest problem you see in Hindus is they don't know how to define themselves, right? If sab kuch chalta hai, then how am I a Hindu, how am I not a Hindu? How do I prevent somebody from saying, well, you know, you don't believe in the Vedas, therefore you can't be a Hindu? They don't know where to quote from, what is the comeback to it. So how are you to define a Hindu in terms of substance and salience when it comes to this?
So actually, Dr. Radhakrishnan, our second president, he very famously called Hinduism not a religion, but a commonwealth of religions. So this is a very interesting term. So in his imagination, and I think his imagination was correct, Hinduism is an umbrella term. The individual panths, the paths, the sampradayas, they might correlate to something more concrete in terms of what your belief and practice should be. At the umbrella level, the universal umbrella is Sanatan Dharma. I would like to believe Hinduism is just the subcontinental subset of it. So anything with an Indian idiom in terms of culture is that subset of the universal Sanatan Dharma, and Sanatan Dharma by that definition could be a neo-pagan faith in Europe today, could be Buddhism as it is practiced in Japan, could be some form of African shamanism, anything which has mutual respect inbuilt in it, where people are more concerned about their own well-being in this world and if there is a world afterwards, as opposed to trying to convert the other person. So I see that as Sanatan Dharma, where mutual respect is the only key building block. Subset of that is Hinduism in the subcontinental sense. That was called a commonwealth of religions by Dr. Radhakrishnan, because within that, as initially Abhijith was saying, you are a Shaivite, you are a Shakta, you are a Vaishnavite, you are a Smarta, you are a Nastik, you are many different possible beliefs, and of course there are multiple hundreds and thousands of permutations and combinations. The reason why this is very important, Abhijith has rightly mentioned, what are the boundary conditions? Where do we say that you are a Hindu and no longer a Hindu? The reason why the Hindu umbrella is so important is it automatically gels with the understanding of a secular state. This is very important. Secularism in India, unfortunately, has become, and I'm slightly, apologize for using slightly strong language, a bastardized term, because pseudo-secularism was effectively used as place for secularism. But secularism, which in Hindi or Sanskrit I would rather define as panth nirpekshata. Again, the commonwealth of religions is the umbrella. The individual paths we can call panth. If you are panth nirpeksh, you are neutral towards the different paths, that is the core understanding of secularism. You are not dharm nirpeksh. Dharm is the umbrella. You cannot be neutral to the umbrella which keeps everything together. But the reason why in a large state today, in a modern democratic context, secularism in this true understanding of panth nirpekshta is extremely important is because anyways the Prime Minister, who is whatever the version of king today, cannot be allowed to give money only to one panth. You are not going to be allowing that. And there is a reality of two universalizing kind of Abrahamic faiths in India as well. So the issue is anything that goes against dharma, in that universal mutual respect sense, a state can control while being secular. But within the dharmic fold, a state cannot support one panth over another, is the true understanding of secularism. And secularism is extremely important. All of us have spoken against Nehru, but one thing I would say in favor of Jawaharlal Nehru, unfortunate that his family is still in politics, so these things get conflated when we do a proper historical analysis, is that the Hindu Hindu Code Bill of the 1950s, which Ambedkar initially supported, but then he resigned because he was impatient. Also, his health was not very well. If you remember, he died in 1956. The Hindu Code Bill is one of the most progressive pieces of legislation that is passed in this country. As somebody who today supports the BJP, I fully support the Hindu Code Bill. The Hindu Code Bill was the building block of a secular India. Its cardinal sin was it was not an Indian code bill. It did not extend to all religions. But I fully support removing all kinds of so-called religious authority which did not give women an equal right to inheritance, which said intercaste marriages cannot happen, etc., etc. That was the building block of truly secular modern India. In that Panth Nirpeksh secular sense, I fully support secularism. That is the definition of dharma. I hope that umbrella analogy is clear to you. Sanatan dharma being the umbrella, Hinduism being a subset of it, individual panths being that which actually correspond to religions, which is what Dr. Radhakrishnan called the commonwealth of religions, and that umbrella in that sense has to be secular, which is why dharma and modernity go very well together. I actually disagree a bit with the opening remarks that Kushal and Abhijith made. I think neo-militant atheism also did something good in the West. If you look at the West, the percentage of Christians has fallen dramatically from around 95% in the 1950s in America, Western Europe, etc., to around 60% today. And a large part of that is because people, of course I understand why they're angry and agree with that on Kushal, is because people there within a free speech context opposed Christianity, and many people therefore become spiritual but not religious. Another thing I disagree on. Spiritual but not religious basically in the West means we don't like organized religion, but I have spiritual hunger. That spiritual hunger is not being fulfilled by being an atheist. They want an alternative. And my point is, it is up to us to provide that alternative. Only when we can get rid of our own insular problems and dharma becomes universal in the true Sanatan sense, just to give back to Abhijith right now, the world is waiting for an answer. We are in a position to give that answer.
So I'll disagree with you on that, and I'll tell you why.
Just let me explain Hinduism in the easiest way possible in modern parlance. Unlike these two gentlemen, I use Android. So Hinduism is Android. And these apps are your different panths. So you pick your app. Wow. And the unique thing is, you are multiple panths in a day. You are an absolute charvak when you go inside a scientific laboratory and you forget about your Ishta Devta, Kula Devta, whatever, and you just follow the scientific method, whatever, and then you come out and then you change your app. You go home, you go back to your mandir if you have one. That's Hinduism. It's a platform that allows different applications to function together, and each and every application has its do's and don'ts. It's just that you're allowed to use all of them simultaneously. This is why we are different, and there's no problem in being
Just
different.
one line there. Unlike NASA scientists, you must have noticed ISRO scientists, some of them are extremely religious.
And we should be proud of that.
And that is what makes Hindu dharma very different. Because in Hindu dharma, dharma and science are not orthogonal to each other. They're not orthogonal to each other because in dharma, the sense of skepticism is inbuilt. In Vedas itself, the Vedas are speculating. Again, another reason why I'm an Nastik. Vedas itself are speculating who knows who created the universe. The Nasadya Sukta. Maybe the gods know, or maybe they don't know either. That's written in the Rig Veda itself. Now that's a very different kind of religious textbook or rule book from any other religious rule books that you'll read. So, which is why I come down to how can you not be an astik in this book? Because this book is saying, I don't know. And it ends by saying, I want all these tribes.
I don't know, but I'm telling you what the basis for I don't know
Exactly.
is. Okay? You should know. When you say you don't know, you should know why you don't know and what you don't know.
I'm honestly speculating, and I want all these tribes, these are the Puru tribes, what is now modern day Haryana, Punjab. I want all of you to come together, listen to each other, be of one heart, and coexist with harmony. It's literally the last few lines in the Rig Veda. So the Rig Veda as a book, these broad ideas, and of course, very famously, the wise call the gods by different names. If you take these three different messages, we are not sure about the ultimate reality. Wise call the gods by different names. Let us all live together in harmony. If these three core messages, which are core Rig Vedic messages, are not universal messages, what are? How can one not, therefore, in that sense, which is why I debate with Kushal often, how can you be a Nastik in Rig Veda? That is my question to him, actually. I answered this right now.
So wait. So I'm going to end the discussion here because we wanted questions, answers. And I just want to say, since he made such an eloquent point, Harsh did, about how, we don't cast dharma and science as binaries. Do you know the other religion that does not cast dharma and science as binaries? Islam. Surprise, surprise. Yes, because a lot of science was suppressed in the Middle Ages in Christendom because all of science revealed God's mysteries and therefore it was bad. But if you read medieval Islam, they loved science because this is how Allah revealed himself to his followers. So if you discovered why, for example, why the sort of planet went around the sun, it was, see, Allah has given you the brain to discover how he did this. Now you can do it. You are blessed. Okay. So remember, every good thing doesn't necessarily have a good trajectory all the time.
Well, that was the Mutazilites, right? But they were beaten.
One second. And finally, I forgot my train of thought. You interrupted me. Very bad.
Sorry.
I just had a question for the economist. So
Harsh.
Mr. Harsh. So you were saying that you don't believe in being spiritual but not religious.
I was not saying that. Because initially Kushal had mentioned that he does not understand why some people say, that's a Facebook description, right? Famous spiritual but not religious. I was saying that many in the West today feel like that because all human beings have some level of spiritual hunger. Let me not say all, let me say most. Okay, some are hardcore materialists. Most people have spiritual hunger, but organized religion is not able to give them an answer. It is in that context because, for example, they're unhappy with the church there, etc. They feel spiritual, but they are not able to call themselves religious. That is the context of what I had said.
Right. But you were saying that you do not essentially believe in such a...
No, I did not even support or oppose it. I was saying why people say that.
Right, okay.
And what I was trying to say was this shows that an expansive dharma actually has a ready-made audience in the world if we get our act together, because people have spiritual hunger. Maybe it is reviving their own ancient gods in a Vedic wrapper while with their own gods. They don't have to believe in Ram and Krishna. But actually there's a very small, but from a small base, rapidly growing neo-pagan populations across the West. From a very small base, but very rapidly growing. So initially they were more on the far right side. They were very race obsessed. That has luckily flipped over. Actually, the neo-pagans in the West today are more likely to be lefty hippies, environmentalists, etc. So it has actually completely changed. So I'm saying it only shows that there is a vacuum which organized religion is unable to fulfill, but the fundamental spiritual hunger of people has not gone. That is the context.
So I was about to ask how, I see a lot of connection between being spiritual and not religious, and Hinduism seen as a commonwealth of all religions.
You can't, I always ask this to people, what part of your spirituality has not been mentioned in the original religiosity? Everybody has cafeteria beliefs since time immemorial, which is why spiritual but not religious is actually a logical fallacy. There is not a single spiritual belief in the entire pantheon of spiritual beliefs that you can point out to and say it doesn't stem from a religious belief. What do we mean by organized religion? Let's say the Dunbar number, the famous Dunbar number, which is human beings basically recollect memories of 250 people. which is what we basically lived in tribes of 100 to 250 people, and that's why we recall that number, because evolution has created our cognitive beliefs to be the certain way. So their religion was that, animism. And look at the universalization there. There might be a tribe in Sentinelese Island and study their beliefs, and go to the Amazonian tribes and study their beliefs. They do the same stuff, albeit in a slightly different way. They are all doing. So there is no spirituality that can't be traced to the baseline religiosity. The reason this has happened in the West is why the one thing I attack the most in my book is neo-atheism.
Can I just tackle this differently? I want to know, when you say I'm spiritual but not religious, break it down into tangibles for me. How are you spiritual exactly?
What I mean is, I could believe in God and still not want to go to the temple. Or I could believe in God and still not want to be part of puja or any ritual.
Yeah.
You're an animist.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right. Both are right. It's just generally people, when they see religion, they mean organized religion.
Let's go to the next question.
Right.
That's what's reconciled.
It's just a caution. See, in the early part of the conversation, when you talked about Vedas and fear, right? One is, I think you guys are very clear about it. I don't know how many others are. When we talk about the Vedas as the primary source of pramana, there also all the four are very different. Rig Veda looks only at possibilities.
Yes.
It's awesome about the world. Yajurveda is only worried about ritual.
Yes.
Samaveda has no mantras on its own.
Yes.
Atharva Veda has a lot of fear inbuilt. So when you're talking about fear...
Magic potions.
Yeah, also I think there's a caution that that earlier part of that conversation you had is a very Brahminical perspective of Hinduism. I am very closely associated with my village. In my village, even today, in the Perumal temple, before the ceremony starts, especially before the chariot goes, they will sacrifice a rooster. And it's completely okay. Right? So over there, in those communities who are also very fiercely Hindu, fear is a way of working. Yes. So just be cautious about that. The other thing that I wanted to say was, I don't think historically, I'm an expert on epigraphs, if you look at epigraphs and inscriptions, caste or varna fluidity in the upper three castes was definitely always there. But definitely 2000 years ago, the fourth caste was excluded. But not excluded completely. There are many inscriptions where parayas, potters, they have contributed stone pillars to temples and their names are mentioned. So were they excluded, not excluded? I think we also have to de-Abrahamize the way we look at it. Today we say all of us are equal, we have to be treated equally. In those days, I think we were more obsessed with equity. So just as much as a Brahmin will not go to a Paraya temple, a Paraya was also not allowed into a Brahmin temple. And the great kings, if you look at kings like Rajaraja, Maravan Sundarapandyan, when there was conflict, he would force communities to come together and work together. So great kings looked at how to bring communities together and work through the temples. Inefficient kings allowed those conflicts to fester. So I think in the way we also do our discourse today, whether we're in the right like me or in the left like others, we have to look at when we take history. History is just a recollection of facts or what we think are facts. Are we using them to polarize people further, or are we using them to bring people together further? That's all I wanted to say.
My thing is, I have belief right now. Please elaborate, please guide me if I'm wrong or right. So you talk about Hindu Code Bill as the greatest thing. I believe it to be the greatest thing for Hindu community in the last 70 years. But
I did not say that. I think I highly support it, yes.
Okay, I think it's great. I think it's great. So, but what you guys also support is uniform civil code. I think if we need to preserve ourselves, Hindus, at least in India, we should not go to we should not support the uniform civil code. Why I say that? Because I believe that Muslims should get Sharia, and to the word Sharia, what is written in Quran, what is written in the Hadith.
Okay, I got the question. Can I answer now? No, I fully disagree with you. in the sense all Indians are my brothers and sisters. All of them, in my view, are entitled to same equal laws, irrespective of religion. Being born in a Muslim family does not mean they should be treated by Sharia laws. I agree that a rhetorical, hypocritical kind of point can be made that you want civil personal laws based on religion, you don't want criminal laws based on religion. But I'm not here in the business of rhetoric, I'm here in the business of solutions. All Indians should have the same laws. We are not here to further polarize, as this gentleman rightly said. We are here to have solutions.
We are modernists. We
And
believe
I
in
believe
modernity.
that a person's birth, just like in a particular caste, does not define his or her lifetime. Born in a particular religion also does not necessarily, that ascriptive identity define his religion. I have many Muslim or Christian friends who are agnostic, atheist, or have a very secular, liberal, humanistic understanding of religion. They definitely want secular laws, strongly oppose Sharia, or whatever the Christian equivalent would have been in earlier medieval times. So to say that Indian Muslims must get Sharia sounds good, but I fully disagree with that. On your point of de-Abrahamicizing the caste history, its point is not about de-Abrahamicizing the particular history. My take on history is very simple. Whatever we think happened, we should speak. If it polarizes, let it polarize. If it brings people together, let it bring people together. Our job, whenever we put on a historian's hat, is not to think of the second order effect. For any reconciliation, truth has to happen. If we only preemptively say, if we speak this, people will get polarized, therefore let us not speak that. If we speak this, people will come together, therefore we should speak more of that. That is the wrong way to look at history. Only and only correct way of looking at history is to say what happened. The next order effect, as politicians, as social activists, is to then take that quote-unquote truth and bring people together. Historians should not pre-censor or self-censor. That's my view.
Thank you so much. I'm Faizur Rahman. I'm the Secretary General of the Islamic Forum for the Promotion of Moderate Thought. So in a sense, I would agree with you on the Sharia part. Of course, what goes by Sharia is not exactly divine today. It's all man-made. It's basically man-made, so in that sense, I might agree with you there. But after having listened to this wonderful, fascinating conversation between three of you, what I feel is this is a classic Newtonian three-body problem, what you have here. Because, But then nonetheless, discussion was absolutely fascinating. See, what I would like to ask you briefly, but maybe I can talk to you after this event because since the questions have to be short. What I want to ask you is, you have not defined religion at all. Because religion, as we know today, is basically a post-enlightenment phenomenon, as you know. Because at that time, when enlightenment was happening, they were basically against the church because the church itself was the state at that time. So now the idea was to counter the church, so secularism came in. So secularism itself behaved like a religion. Capitalism behaved like a religion, just different. But then what constituted religion was also clearly defined in those times, And Christianity, Islam, and Judaism were put in the bracket of religions. And maybe Buddhism and
Okay,
others
so
too.
basically...
So you have not defined religion. So
well, actually, I have. You have to buy my book.
Yeah, no. In this conversation, I mean. So what I want is, how would you define Hinduism? Is it like an umbrella term of different philosophies? Or is it just a religion?
It's an umbrella term of different philosophies that has many religions in it. That's what Hinduism is. That's exactly how we defined it. The app example is an apt way of explaining that. Hinduism itself is not a religion, but it has religions.
Commonwealth of religions, as Dr. Radhakrishnan said.
Well, you have to buy my book. If I give everything out, nobody will buy my book. After all, I am a materialist.
Ultimately, he was a businessman before he became an author. So,
congrats, Kushal, for your book. I haven't bought your book as yet. I hope to pick it up and read it. Two questions. If you call yourself a Hindu, how do you call yourself a Hindu? Question one. If you call yourself a nastika, is that a belief or is that something beyond belief? Meaning, is it evidence-based or is it a belief? Like belief in God, for the lack of a better word, is a belief, may or may not be evidence-based. is your absence of belief in God, if that is what your frame of Nastik is that based on evidence or not, or that does not matter?
So I'll answer your second question first. In my case, I have very categorically stated it in my book is, my answer on the question of God is not, I don't know, or there is no God. My answer on the question of God is, I don't care. And I'm being as straightforward as possible. I live my life not caring about a God. So Jordan Peterson once famously said, Sam Harris lives his life making the assumption there is no God. He cannot prove or disprove it. I live my life making the assumption there is a God. And he was very clear, the God is a biblical God, in the case of Jordan Peterson. I live assuming there is one. So I gave you the opposite. I live my life not caring about a God. Because everything in my existence, from getting up in the morning to going to sleep in the evening, there is just no need of all the definitions of a God, whether they are the Islamic God, whether they are the biblical God, whether they are the Vaishnavite God, whether they are the Shaivite God, whether they are the animistic God, whatever they are, it is immaterial to my existence, so I don't care about it. So that's my answer. It's not a belief or a disbelief. It is immaterial to my system. That's the second question. Now the first question, I want to understand it better. So what exactly were you asking about? Okay. Mutual respect, reciprocity are the two fundamental building blocks of non-monotheistic philosophy. The moment you become a non-monotheist, you have to believe in mutual respect, and not just mutual respect. Because you believe in mutual respect, there has to be reciprocity. So, first of all, I want to thank all of you. You knew this book was called Nastik, but the tagline was, why I am not an atheist. It's very confusing, right? Kya kar raha hai? On one hand, he says he's a Nastik, then the tagline he says he's not an atheist. Be clear. The point is, that is the point. This is how we are. And why I am able to do that and why all of you turn up, you will never agree with me in my personal way of living life. You will care about a God. You will care about those answers. You may care about afterlife or punarjanam, as we like to call it, or reincarnation. I don't care about it. I live my life assuming I don't know what's going to happen after I'm dead. I'm going to make the most of this life that I have in my way. But the point is that I still agree in the principle of mutual respect and reciprocity. Because that is what my society has. I mean, whether it's in Delhi, Harsh was there, Abhijith was there, both in Mumbai and Delhi. Whether it was Toronto, whether it's Chennai. I have gotten nothing but love from average temple-going, mosque-going, church-going Indian origin people. Why do you think an Indian Muslim or an Indian Christian is the way they are? Why are they the way they are? There is something in our source code that makes us the way we are. And that is the eternal rule of mutual respect and reciprocity, which is inbuilt in our code. So why am I a Hindu? Is because I believe in mutual respect and reciprocity. Why I am a Nastik is, I go by textual definitions. I have read literature, I have quoted that literature. I am just saying these people categorized Nastik and Nastik like that. Who am I to fight with them? They are not even alive. So as per their definition, I am one. As per my definition, I don't even care about these things. I'm happy on team human. As far as I'm concerned, I'm team human, team planet Earth. I don't believe in the Elon Musk idea of going to Mars. Pehle yahan to sambhal le. So my personal beliefs don't matter. This book is my explanation of Indian philosophy. I'm explaining Indian philosophy on the terms of Indian scholars. And my citations are there. You can check my citations. Whether it's endogamy, I have given the most authentic scientific papers on endogamy, which clearly show in the last 1500 years this society has practiced endogamy and the genetic data doesn't lie. So this is how I explain. So you have to understand, my book is not about my personal belief. I try to weave in a bit of my personal journey in that, which he read very eloquently. But it's more about, this is my life, but it's not about me. This is how you guys think. All of us think like that. We just did not know why we are the way we are. Why we are all together over here and all of us have so many differences is because at its core, dharma allows these differences.
Happy evening to all. This question is open to all three of you. And thank you, sir, for all the wonderful discussion. If we look at our father's generation or the one before that, in the context of Indian history, atheism, agnosticism was kind of frowned upon. It was not generally accepted. And nastika, astika existed as always. And nirishwaravadis were, like I said, they were not considered to an extent.
Can you show me one verse where the Sankhya Karikas were uniquely disrespected for the Nirishwarvad?
I don't have an evidence for
So
that.
you know,
You made a
sorry, one
factual claim without
second,
showing
one second.
evidence.
You know Savarkar was an atheist?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What was the disrespect shown to him? He was literally allowed to go around breaking rules, forcing inter-caste temples or ending caste segregation. So, you know, I'm not seeing what you're seeing. Give me a tangible example.
No, when I mean disrespect, not in a way, the literal disrespect, but people did not accept him. There was a Hindu
Define acceptance.
There was a Hindu majority that did not agree with Savarkar in the pre-independence India.
Please define acceptance. What do you mean when you say people were not accepting
Standing
of
by
this
the side
belief?
of it. Standing by the side of him. But okay, that was not my initial question. My question
So I'll give you examples, right?
Sorry.
Let him ask your question quickly.
What is the romanticism or the fantasy that the current Indian youth is having with a tagline of calling themselves as atheist? Or how has the Western culture has had an impact on the Indian youth calling themselves as atheist? Is my question.
I think it's more of a vacuum. It's when you don't have crystal clear explanations of, you know, 90% of what I hear is people haven't even read their own texts. Okay, a Muslim kid, sorry, I'm going to stand up because I've had enough of sitting down. A Muslim kid will go to a muezzin, a mullah or something to learn their text. If you have to get admitted in Stella Maris or Loyola or something like that, you need to have finished your catechisms, your Catholic catechisms or the Protestant equivalent of it. How many of you here have actually done any kind of formal lessons with a certification process in Hinduism? Have you? None. So most of what we learn is through osmosis. Okay? We don't have a formal education system where you actually learn anything about your religion. Now, when you don't learn about your religion, you are vacant, you are open. You are open to many different ideas. You have not been dogmatized in that sense. And one of the things that happens then is, you see something in the West, it's very cool, I want to become like it. You don't have a definition of yourself, so you think, one is that it's cool, but the second is something approximate that suits you, and you just take it on without understanding the consequences of taking it on, or, you know, it's like a cut-paste solution that doesn't work. It's like plagiarizing an article. I once had an intern who literally cut-pasted Wikipedia. And trust me, it didn't work in the Indian context at all. I was reading it and going, what the hell? But it happened, you see. That is why it sounds a bit off and weird. Okay. It's a vacuum.
First of all, thank you all for the great work you're doing and for being with us today. My question is about the Constituent Assembly debate. Like we have heard, like through osmosis, YouTube osmosis, that they, for a long time, discussed the right to practice, profess, and propagate religion. And finally, our founding fathers and mothers reached a certain conclusion. So my question is two-part. One is, to what extent, if any, do you think that that conclusion which got codified contributed to a trajectory that led to the climate we see today in terms of religious tensions associating with our society and politics? And if at all you see that there is some extent it played, do any of you harbor a wish that that debate might have concluded differently and resulting in a more healthy trajectory? And if so, what would that be?
I'll simply answer very specific answer to that. if you have the right to propagate X, then the right to criticize X must be an equal fundamental right. You cannot have the right.
Thumbs up to that.
You cannot have the right to propagate X in the name of religious freedom, and then the right to criticize X in the name of offending sentiments is not allowed. So long as it is symmetrical, I have full confidence in the beauty, harmony, and the long-term sanctity of our civilization, but I fully oppose uninhibited propagation, while in the name of respecting sentiments, you ban my criticizing, however strongly, vehemently, sometimes in an ugly manner, X.
Thanks. So my question is to Kushal sir. I mean, humans have belief in everything. So what do you think was the main thing that religion attracted the most of the core belief? Like Raj Chola, when he went to North, he was a great lover of poetry, but he did not take any of Kalidas' texts. He took the Ganga river and took it to Ganga Cholapuram. So what do you think was so specific in religion that most of the believers went over there? Like I myself, I'm interested in art, but I never make art as a religion. But certain gods or idols have been made into religion all over the world. What do you think was so specific that people like me who have belief in other things could not make it into something religious, but gods and idols all over the world could be made into a religious belief?
So, right, everybody says all of us have a God-shaped hole in us. One of the biggest things that has happened in the West post-neo-atheism, I have to explain it through a historical example, I apologize for that, is that when neo-atheism happened, and this is why we vehemently disagree, is neo-atheism happened at a very specific time after 9/11. It was a historical context to it. The first atheistic society was set before 9/11, but it was like that, funny boy in the corner jumping, dancing around. Nobody cared. Everybody. But 9/11 happened, and then I don't know how else to put it. The West wanted to attack Islam. The West had to couch it by attacking religion. Now, as they say in Hindi, galti se mistake ho gaya. What they did was, they forgot that Muslims were not even 1% of their society at that time. They kept on attacking religion. They smashed their own religion. So much for strategy. So they threw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, I often hang out with new atheists. Listen, I've been one. I still hang out with them. I am very much involved in the atheistic community. I help them. I've helped atheists in Pakistan. Let me answer, yaar. मेरे को मालूम है वो क्या पूछ रहा है. शांति रख. Religion fills something that is beyond just art. That is the reason why wokeism is a thing in the West now. The reason is that they did not have the old religion. Sam and Annika Harris are a prime example. They're both atheists. Their children grew up atheists. Sam is a Buddhist, meditates. Annika is a Buddhist or a panpsychist who meditates. Their kids have that God-shaped hole being filled through sadhana. In the case of all of these kids, why do people, there is something neurological. I don't have the answer for that. But religion fills something clearly, which is why it is the baseline that when you smash religion, they all go back to the baseline. It's just a new religion in the form of wokeism. If otherwise, we would all be happy with Rohit Sharma winning the World Cup and we would all dump religion. Clearly, Rohit Sharma winning the World Cup is not enough for you. Going to that 2020 match is not enough for you. Which is why never fall for stupid atheistic arguments like, oh, we can go and watch a soccer game. You clearly can watch a soccer game. More than half of the people who watch sport are temple-going or church-going or mosque-going people. They still go and find something more. So the answer to your question is religion gives you something beyond baseline comprehension. I don't know why. I don't need it. I don't have any answer for it. But I clearly know most people do. And I can't just shut my ears down to it. There is no answer, is my answer. But we know the answer, it is religion.
Yeah. So this is the hometown of Subramanya Chandrasekhar. Sitting here, he was able to formulate the life and death of stars, the famous Chandrasekhar limit. So he's on record saying that he's not religious and he's an atheist. So the key question is that, given that what you say, right, you know, this Android app system, etc., science can actually fulfill the same role as what you're saying. You can have love, you can have art, so his famous quote is, in his Nobel lecture is, "Simple is the seal of the true, and beauty is the splendor of truth." After all, we all seek the truth. So why wouldn't science fill that role?
Can I answer that? Sure. Let me go for it, and then I'll answer it.
So science cannot answer a few things. It just answers one more layer of the onion. For example, sentience. Science has no understanding of sentience. Science can explain in a neurological sense, in a biochemical sense, what is sentience. We've tried to understand artificial intelligence as passing the Turing test. If we think the other software is sentient, but sentience, what we feel as being conscious and alive and aware, is something that science only gets one layer deeper. Similarly, the beginning of the universe. Similarly, what happens after death. These are fundamental questions that you have one more layer of the onion answered by science, and which in our case of dharma we totally accept. Nobody here is going to say earth is flat, somebody is flying to the moon, etc., etc. The point is, there are some fundamental questions what Kushal was hinting at, what Abhijith was earlier hinting at, the need for transcendence. To be transcendent, understand what is there beyond us. That I think all of us, almost all of us, again, almost all of us, have a deep desire and hunger to understand. And there are some questions, the 3 examples which I gave you, sentience, beginning of the universe, and what happens after death, which there are no answers to except another deeper answer. And that is what religion, spirituality, as you were mentioning earlier, or maybe some people it might be music. It may not be religion in a classical sense. It might be sports, it might be dancing. It might be meditation, it might be yoga. There is something that allows us to feel above the immediate, whatever you want to call it. So I don't agree with that. Science will answer will fulfill the role of all the apps on the operating system, so to speak.
It can't. I'm not denying the principles of science at all, and that's how I live my life. But let me try and explain this to you in the best way possible, to the best of my ability. When you feel love for someone, all you know is certain neurons in your brain are firing. When you put on an fMRI, it's called a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine.
Very romantic.
Great. So all you can tell me is these regions in the brain are firing, right? These chemicals are creating a certain chain reaction. These neurons are firing at this rate, and you are doing this reaction for that. Now, you must have gone through split brain experiments. You must have gone through the entire pantheon of things. Now, then we have to get into the debate of whether free will exists or not. I don't know where you stand. I mean, I'm assuming if you're a neuroscientist, you should not, considering the literature. But even you can't explain why you love someone. All you can explain is when you love someone, this is what is happening. Let us not confuse the why with the what is happening. You don't know why it is happening. I don't know why it is happening. Why can't we be epistemically humble, which is what the scientific method tells us? I'm not saying I clearly don't live my life reading religious texts and following what they say. But at the same time, I don't have the arrogance that unfortunately that has crept into a very tiny corner of the scientific community, of sneering. Paul Bloom, a great atheistic philosopher, has recently written something in the book. I think scientific community needs to start appreciating what religion offers, because religion offers a shortcut method of giving many answers that science takes 20,000 pages to. Nobody has the time, sir. So if science was so awesome in explaining these things, at the mimetic time scale, why are we worried? It will win anyway. Why are we worried?
We have a last question there.
My question is to Mr. Madhusudan. You had spoken about your analogy of the umbrella and dharma. So could you explain how that umbrella extends to non-Hindu traditions? closer, sorry.
So I think
could I just
yeah, I got your question.
Could I just add a little bit?
Yeah,
to that?
sure.
And
A bit louder.
More specifically, what are the practical, legal, and social differences in a world that believes in what you call pseudo-secularism, rather than a world that believes in a secularism that you defined?
Very good questions. I'll answer that very quickly. I would not use the concept of phrase you call non-Indian religions. I would use non-dharmic religions, because there are many non-Indian religions that I would, in a universal Sanatan Dharma, consider dharmic. For example, Shintoism, which actually in Japan was always in a very deep, intertwined harmony with Buddhism. Actually, Shintoism as a standalone faith is a very post-Meiji restoration kind of invention. So it's not just Indian, by the way. The way I would see that is anything which does not respect the umbrella, or to use Kushal's analogy, an app is fine so long as it does not attack the operating system. So anything that does not respect the umbrella or the operating system is not dharmic, is outside of that dharmic fold. So which is why mutual respect or reciprocity is the definition we again go back to. In terms of secularism versus pseudo-secularism, very simple. The rules and regulations for educational institutions in India are not the same. They depend on, if you are a religious minority, you get exemption from Right to Education Act. You can even if you get funds from the government. Whereas if you are not from a minority, you are not exempt from RTE, even if you are completely self-funded. So there are many discriminatory regulations which in the name of secularism have happened. Similarly, in the case of personal laws, an Indian Muslim man can have 4 wives. Although why would anybody want 4 wives separate? I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but nonetheless, the law right now allows that. It's not the case for Muslim women or for non-Muslim men or women. So that's clearly a case of pseudo-secularism, because the so-called secularists defend in the name of secularism. So the answers are very clear. We have to go towards a system of individual rights where laws are equal towards all, and eventually that will apply to issues of affirmative action as well, as our society becomes more socially, economically mobile. So I hope that answers both your questions.
Yeah, we can take it all offline. I just want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart once again for turning up over here. This is my 3rd time in Chennai, and it's been a wonderful experience, and the questions were amazing. I want to thank everybody, Harsh, Abhijith, everybody here. Thank you very much, and I hope when you end up reading my book, if you do read my book, you appreciate that I'm very critical of my culture also in chapter 5. You might find it offensive as Hindus, because I pay special attention to Hinduism and I quote chapter and verse, but I still end up saying why I am a Hindu. So you will learn to appreciate it. It's an ode to my culture while I'm criticizing it.
Also, thank you to Gopal sir. Thank you to Abhijith for excellent moderation. Thank you, sir. Thank you to Chennai International Centre.
That's another fascinating event that is coming to a close. Let me I quoted from the beginning of the book. Let me end by quoting from the end of the book. He says, ultimately, the choice to remain a Hindu is a testament to the value and relevance I find in its teachings. This choice reflects my journey of exploration, understanding, and self-discovery. It is a conscious decision to align myself with a tradition that resonates with my beliefs, values, and aspirations. I am actively participating in a living tradition by choosing to be a Hindu, not just following the path my ancestors set out for me. I am contributing to its continuity and evolution, shaping it with my experience and insights, and ensuring its relevance for future generations. My journey exemplifies the essence of Hinduism as a flexible, adaptable, and deeply personal spiritual path. It serves as a reminder that religion is not just about heritage or tradition, but it ultimately a personal choice, a conscious commitment to a set of values, and a path that brings meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. I do not know what happens to us once we die, but I do care about it. But while I am alive, I live as a Hindu, and I am proud of that. I think that sums up the book. As I said, I quoted from the beginning and I quoted from the last. Nadula konjam pakkam kaano. So please buy the book and you'll get the full picture. Thank you very much, and I have the pleasure to thank Kushal Mehra for coming down, Harsh Gupta Madhusudan, and our own Abhijith Iyer for beautifully conducting this event. We hope to see you all in future events too, and we hope to see the audience giving us the encouragement. And in case some of you are wondering why you have been upgraded to business class from the usual economy class, well, this is a sponsored event, and I do encourage other members to also come forward and sponsor future events which will help us to make you travel business class. Thank you.